Hello bakers, I hope you're ready because this is the chocolate cake recipe. You know what? I haven't done a classic 3-layer chocolate cake in ages, and I wanted to share my latest recipe with you. It's a bit of a twist on a devil's food cake. It borrows some of the elements that work, and if you've had a devil's food cake, you know it's moist, it's chocolatey, it's rich, it doesn't crumble, and that's due in part to a few key ingredients. So as I start sifting all my dry ingredients, and what's great about this recipe is you can mix the cake batter entirely by hand. So you do want to sift your dry ingredients because I've got my flour. I'm adding some granulated sugar. I will be adding light brown sugar, but I'm adding that to my wet ingredients. And then we've got the cocoa. So a typical devil's food cake uses cocoa as opposed to melted chocolate in the batter to give it that color and, of course, chocolate intensity. Another ingredient that's key to a devil's food cake is a higher proportion of baking soda to baking powder, or even sometimes just baking soda. But I find for this recipe, to get a cake that bakes with a nice level top, I do 1 teaspoon of baking soda and half a teaspoon of baking powder. Now I'll add my salt and sift this all together. Not everyone has cake and pastry flour in the pantry, especially if you're not baking on a regular basis. So using all-purpose flour, isn't it nice to know it works just fine? With the dry ingredients sifted, now I can focus on the wet ingredients. I've got 2 eggs. Common, but not essential for a devil's food cake, is using sour cream, or in this case, I'm using buttermilk. Usually there is some sort of added liquid. And this is an oil-based cake, so I'm using a neutral oil. I'll add my vanilla. And I don't want to forget about the brown sugar. It does add a richness and a moisture to the cake batter, which is really satisfying. And the simple reason I add it to my wet ingredients, other than the fact that it does soften up the batter faster because it's sort of melting into the liquid, is if I were to add it into my ingredients to be sifted, it wouldn't sift through. Okay, the wet ingredients go into the dry. And you'll find as you're whisking it, it will become a little bit dense. You've got the buttermilk that's starting to hydrate the cocoa powder a little bit. And if you're finding that it's a bit hard to whisk, see, I haven't incorporated all my dry ingredients yet, but the batter's kind of dense, you can reach for your last ingredient, the hot coffee. This is that last key ingredient in a devil's food cake. It can be hot water if you don't like the taste of coffee, but the coffee really does enhance the chocolate flavor. And so this helps to liquefy the batter, and also the cocoa starts absorbing the liquid, and that's what helps to lend your cake batter its structure so that it bakes up nice and fluffy and it won't be too dense. There we go, that softened it up. And you do want to make sure your coffee or your hot water is just that. It doesn't have to be boiling hot, but you want it to be hot because at the same time, it also melts the sugar a little bit. I'm being very careful here. Once you've got all your ingredients combined, give it a good whisk, just about 15 seconds or so, just to make sure everything's nice and smooth. And this is now ready for my pans. With this batter, you can make 2 9-inch layers, or if you want a taller cake, then you would go for 3 8-inch layers. I just want the pans to be level. I've greased the pans, lined the bottoms with parchment paper. What I have found with this batter recipe, some recipes call for you to flour the sides of the pan or use cocoa powder. This cake doesn't stick and it rises and holds its shape, so you don't have to worry about it collapsing. So you don't need to bother flouring it. Really scrape out the bowl. Divide that between the 3 pans. It's always surprising when you divide batter between your pans how little batter there seems to be. But this will more than double in size to give you nice, tall, rich, chocolatey cake layers. I've preheated my oven to 350, and these cake layers take about 30 minutes to bake. Test the doneness by dropping that skewer inside the center. When it comes out clean of crumbs, you know you're good. Here are the cake layers out of the oven, so you can see they're nice and level. Look at how that chocolate color really came through. What I like to do is let them cool in the pan for about 15-20 minutes because they're really fragile hot from the oven. But to prevent condensation, it makes for easier spreading of your frosting. You won't get crumbs on the surface. You want to pull them out of the pans to cool completely. So now it's time to talk about this frosting, which starts with a fudge sauce / filling. And this is so multi-purpose and so delicious and easy to make. There's some similar ingredients that went into the cake batter that go into this cooked fudge sauce. So first, my white sugar and some light brown sugar. I have cocoa powder, the same type that you use in the cake itself is fine. And I'm going to give this just a little whisk. You don't have to bother sifting the cocoa powder here because it's going to get whisked into more of a liquid state, so the lumps all break down. Now, some whipping cream, as well as a little corn syrup to give it gloss and almost give it that confection side of things. If you don't want to use corn syrup, you could use a golden syrup or even honey would work. But it's really about giving this fudge sauce / filling, because it's not a frosting yet, a nice glossiness to it. So now you whisk this to combine, and I'm going to take it over to the heat. So on medium heat, there's medium. I whisk this first to combine all the dry ingredients, really work that cocoa powder in there, and then stirring occasionally, regularly, but not constantly. I want to bring this up to a simmer. So while that base starts to simmer, you can get your other ingredients ready. I've got couverture baking chocolate here. I like to use bittersweet to play against the sweetness of the added sugar and the little bit of corn syrup, and a touch of butter. So this is what's going to create the set. So while warm, this is just such a glossy fudge sauce, but when it sets up, thanks to the chocolate and the butter, you get this pipeable filling or topping. I've used this fudge sauce on my peanut butter layer cake, and it also makes an excellent drip. If you like a drip cake and drip down the sides of it, this is the sauce you want to use. I save a little salt for the very end. It's just a habit. You can add it earlier on, but when you're taught to make candy, you're always taught to add the salt at the end because it can interfere with the way the sugar is cooking. We're not reaching a specific temperature here. We're just bringing everything to a simmer to combine it, but still, it's just a habit. Here we go. Now that I've seen a few bubbles, I can add my chocolate and the butter. And just so I don't forget, I'll stir in the salt. I want to make sure the sauce is nice and smooth. Oh, look at that gloss. There we go. So now it can come off the heat. And the chocolate. You can see why this makes just a brilliant chocolate sauce. This delicious sauce will keep in the fridge as long as the expiry date on your cream. And when chilled, it does set up. So you can just scoop out a bit, pop it in the microwave, and then it remelts into this beautiful fudge sauce. But for me to turn this into a frosting, I have to let it chill completely. It's time to make this frosting. So I have my chilled fudge sauce filling that is now going to become the frosting. A little tip, when you do chill it, it does set up. Remember all that chocolate and butter in there. So before I whip it, I like to pull it out about half an hour to an hour, depending on the ambient temperature, to soften up a little bit, just so it whips and you can get some air into this fudge sauce to turn it into a frosting. So first thing I want to do is actually fluff this up a little bit. And this, now you see what I mean about a filling that can be piped. When I pipe it at room temperature. So I do let it soften up a little more. It's kind of like softening up butter. You have to be a bit patient. Try and avoid the microwave because then you melt it when you don't mean to melt it and then you're waiting for it to set up again. You can use electric beaters or the paddle attachment. And as this filling aerates, you'll see it turn lighter in color. Just like when you're making a buttercream, an American style buttercream, you gotta scrape your bowl a few times. But what I love about this frosting is that I'm not relying on icing sugar. I've never been fond of the grittiness in a chocolate buttercream. You go to all that work to make a delicious chocolate cake and then the texture isn't right on the frosting. And I have found while a ganache is handy, it can be too rich and overwhelm. So this frosting strikes that perfect balance between the cake and the frosting to give you the chocolate cake. Look at how fluffy that's getting. But we're not done. I'm not relying just on this because it's not enough actually to cover the cake completely unless you did a really sheer layer. What I want to work in is a package of softened cream cheese. This cuts the sweetness of the cake, gives the frosting structure and body, and where sometimes cream cheese frostings can be a little droopy, because of the chocolate, the base of this fudge frosting, it holds everything in place. So while this is mixing, I'll add it a little at a time and let it really kind of work in and fluff up at the same time. All right, one more scrape of the bowl and another 30 seconds of whipping, and this will be ready to use. You really get a sense how rich and dense, yet somehow fluffy this frosting is. Oh, it handles so well. Okay, time to frost this cake. I buy these at the dollar store. They're meant to be jar openers, but they work perfect as a base when you're assembling cakes. Get chocolate everywhere. Now, my first layer. I wanted to keep the focus on this recipe video on the actual cake and the frosting itself. Assembly is important, of course, but I'm going to keep the decor relatively simple. I'll let you get as creative as you want. Now that you have a good foundational recipe, look at how beautifully that spreads. It looks chocolatey and rich. It's creamy. It's not too airy. And it chills beautifully. If you've watched my videos before, you know I like making cake layers. If you can, avoid slicing them. So I like that this makes a 3-layer cake, but you're not slicing a cake horizontally, trying to get it straight. Little tips when it comes to decorating. Put more frosting on. It's easier to pull away frosting and take it off the cake than it is to add it in little increments. So I dollop in the center and then I push the frosting to the outsides and I push it over the top of the cake, right to the outside edge, because all of this excess frosting is going to join with the frosting I add to the sides, and it makes it easier to cover the sides. A cake wheel is not essential, but it is helpful. But if you're going to assemble without a cake wheel, try and use a flat plate without a lip to it to get in the way of your spatula. I think you have a sense of the consistency and the texture of this frosting. I'm going to go for just a simple decor style using my offset spatula. No piping tips required. I'll do the same on the top. All right. Now I'll just give this a chance to chill in the fridge and we can cut into it. It doesn't look any different out of the fridge, and that's good. It's not supposed to, but now let's check it out. Inside and out. Yum. I'll admit, I like to chill the cake to set it. Makes it easier to transport, move around. But when it comes time to serve it, I like to pull it out about half an hour before I'm going to cut into it. We've got a delicious chocolate layer cake with that fudgy frosting without any grittiness from icing sugar. What makes this the chocolate cake? Well, you've got the moist cake layers, 3 of them, sandwiched between a fudgy, decadent frosting. I know you're gonna wanna make this recipe, and also I know you can make this recipe. When you give it a try, leave your comments below, and I also like hearing about your variations. If you switch it up and make it your own, please let me know. Baking is about sharing. That's why we're here. Thank you for following the channel, and now, go turn on the oven. It's time to make some cake. Textbook.